Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Monday. We have a very busy week this week. We're opening the doors on Thursday for new members and the exciting new full frame club. So I'll be telling you all about that during the course of the week. But for now, have a little intro video and we'll talk a little bit about getting sharp action shots. Afternoon, everybody. Welcome. So I'll let give it a few seconds for people to sort of catch up and log on. Looks like there's some people here already, which is great. So yeah, we've got a busy week this week. Lots of live webinars, one today and two most of the other days. I've got a list which I'll go through in a minute. But today I just want to talk about getting sharp action shots. Well, sharp shots, actually. It's something that people ask me about a lot when they're either part of the academy or thinking about joining or just generally messaging me. And it is one of those things, isn't it? You know, whatever image we're trying to take, you want it in focus and sharp. And it can be a challenge at times. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. While that's going on, while you're sort of logging on and everything, I shall put the website address in here. If you want to join the Academy Full Frame Club, that is, the registration is open now and we're opening the doors on Thursday for that, as well as normal full membership. So we haven't opened for ages. And I've had a lot of people messaging me saying, oh, I want to join when you open. Beyond the Lens Academy.com. Got that right? Beyond the Lens Academy.com. Right, that's the website. At the top of it at the moment, there is a link. Actually, a little video of me. I think I did can't remember now, live last week, just talking about the Full Frame Club, what it is, a little bit about business and stuff, because that's the main thing about the Full Frame Club. If you're thinking about earning some money from your photography or want to earn more from your photography than you already are, that's what that's about. So at the top of the website, there's a link. In fact, I can put the link in here as well if you already know what it's all about. It's just a registration form. And what that does, it gives me some information about all those that have expressed interest. And we've had a lot already. And we only opened the doors on that for, I can't remember now, last Thursday, Friday. And we've had quite a lot of people already. It's going to be limited because we want to work with people who want to work with their photography, if that makes sense. And afternoon, Keith. There he is, one of our members. So that's all there. So what can I tell you? While there's a few people coming on, the rest of the week, before we while we get the numbers up, we have, let me get my little list up. It's all on the website. I've just done a post about the list. There's all the links to the live webinars are there. So if you scroll down the page, you'll be able to get the link and well, get the link, so to speak, but you just press get reminder and it sends you a reminder. So on this week we have, right, let's have a little look. Where's it gone? Right, here we go. So today, obviously, in a minute now, we are going to be talking about getting sharp action shots, an often constant challenge. Then tomorrow at midday, we are talking about photography business challenges. You know, what are the things that get in the way of starting a business or get in the way of progress once you've started a business, and curveballs and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to touch on that. These are meant to be interactive sessions as well, by the way. So if you've got any questions, do ask. So that's midday tomorrow. And then in the afternoon, 3 o'clock, I'm back on. Busy day, as I said. I'm going to talk about the importance of personal style. What is it? How do you get it? And why is it so important? And trust me, it is very, very important. And then we move to Wednesday. And we just got one on Wednesday, so not so bad. Although it'll be good, quite an interesting one on Wednesday, because I'm going to be talking about Lightroom. So I should go do a live edit showing you the new masking tools of Lightroom, because if anybody's using Lightroom Classic particularly, it's had some updates in the last sort of it's always having updates, but it's had some pretty funky ones recently with masking. And it can be confusing because the term masking makes people think about how Photoshop works with layers and masks, and Lightroom is different. So I'm going to talk about that, show you what they are, show you how to use them. It's funky feature, that is. So that's Wednesday. Then Thursday, we've got three on Thursday. Bit of a cough, not the dread. So on Thursday we have first thing in the morning, 10 o'clock, because that is when we are opening the doors. So I'm going to be live first thing in the morning, just telling you a bit more about it. You'll be able to go onto the registration form, which will have gone rather, and you'll be able to log on and live and join. And there'll be a lot more information there about what's involved, what you get, and some amazing offers. The finance team have gone nuts, but it's Christmas and it's been an odd couple of years, shall we say. So there's going to be some amazing offers in there. So that's 10 o'clock on Thursday morning, followed by 2 o'clock, marketing your photography business. So how do you get it out there? How do you get the word out? There are lots of businesses, maybe lots of businesses doing the same thing that you're doing, whether it's dogs, equine, weddings, portraiture, whatever it is. We cover all that in the academy. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit on Thursday. And then Thursday evening, I thought I'd do one of an evening because I'm conscious that whilst there's quite a few people showing up here, which is great, not everybody can during the course of the day. So I thought I'd do one at 7 p.m. in the evening, get yourself a cup of tea or a glass of wine. And we are going to be talking about, it's a masterclass, I'm calling it. Sounds funky, doesn't it? So I'll have a bit more time probably. Turning your photography into a business. So that's Thursday evening at 7 o'clock. Really important one, that one, because that's, one of the biggest challenges that people face. And I know a lot of people are interested in it for next year because the last few years have been a challenge and a lot of people have wanted to change direction and do different things. So that's why we're doing that one. Then Friday, 10 a.m., creating and managing leads. So where do you get all these leads from? Once you've got a business, how do you get customers? How do you manage them? What's the process? What works? What doesn't work? And then on midday on Friday, and I'm going to leave you in peace after that. I might do one over the weekend. We are going to be talking about cheap competition and how that affects your confidence and how to deal with it, because it comes up all the time. Any business, that's an issue. But it's a bit of a non-issue actually, which I will share with you on Friday. So that's the layout for the week. There's a post on the Facebook page, whichever you're on, actually also on YouTube as well. No, it's not. It's on Facebook, both the Facebook pages. So Beyond Lens Academy and Carl Thomas Photography, there's a post with a microphone on it, and it's got all the listed ones on there. And if you scroll down the page, then you'll be able to see where they all are. And I've posted them all this morning, so they should be all in relatively simple order, so that you can find the ones that may be of interest to you. Click get a reminder so you remember that I'm going to be live at whatever date is. So cool. A few links coming in, a couple of registrations, which is good. So I'll make a start. So getting sharp images. What are the issues? And it is a very popular question. I'm sort of known for it. So here we go. Here's little Mr. Bumblebee. Look, tack sharp. Mr. Dolphin. Oh, Mr. Is it really? Could be Mrs. Who knows? Tack sharp. Nice and sharp. Salmon. I mean, that's quite a challenge to get a sharp image like that. So kind of what are the tips and techniques? And some of it's pretty well known and quite obvious in some ways, but let's go through them. So the first thing really is shutter speed. So whatever subject you are photographing, let's assume for the moment it's a moving subject, because that's usually the challenging thing. You need a shutter speed appropriate to the movement of that subject relative, this is the important bit, relative to your sensor and the movement across it. So, for example, this salmon jumping at a rate of knots over in a flicker, I was shooting at a couple of thousandths of a second because my camera is still on a tripod, everything's in manual, and so it's going straight across the frame at quite a pace. Whereas this shot, let me find it. I've got a shot where it's almost like panning, but I don't find it now. I've got so many images on here. Here we go. This one was shot at, I think it's a thousandth of a second, which allows me to, because I'm panning with the bird, obviously his wings are going up and down, so it still needs to be relatively fast to freeze the action. But by having a slower shutter speed, because, if somebody's going to go, let's get my little lens mug thing. Someone does that pretty quick. But if you are following it with your lens, the relationship between the speed of the subject that's moving and your lens and your sensor that's in the back of the camera is reduced significantly. So you can get away with a slower shutter speed. So keep that in mind. Something coming towards you sometimes will be getting bigger, but not necessarily, 30 miles an hour towards you, dog, maybe 20, it's getting bigger. It's not moving as fast as if it shoots across the frame at 300 miles an hour, like said dog there. So that's important. So, a fast shutter speed is important for those kind of things. The other thing to consider, the other end of the spectrum, are subjects that are still. Here we go, here's another fast shutter speed. So whilst this one wasn't moving across the frame very fast because he was hovering, he was moving fast. As well as, where is it, Mr. Bumblebee? Yeah. That one there. So his wings are not quite sharp because they are moving fast. So you just got to think about all those things there. Now, one of the things that people often get wrong is they go the other end of the spectrum when it's like a slow-moving subject or a still subject. I use the word still advisedly, like this one up. Nice and sharp. Or, there's my little, there he is. This one, nice and sharp. But subjects that have got free move, like horses' hair, manes, dogs' hair, humans' hairs, coats, jackets, whatever it might be, if those are subject to still, are they still, is the question. So you'll often find, and I often find this from working with some of the people in the academy, that they'll say, "Oh, it's not, my image is not sharp. It's not sharp. It was sat still. It should be sharp." And the shutter speed, you sort of think, well, it's still subject. I might get within 250th of a second. The issue, of course, is that whilst the subject itself is broadly still, the fur, and if it's a dog completely covered in it, or a bird, or whatever it might be, water, something, is shimmering and moving. So you've got to compensate for that as well. So don't get drawn into the trap of fast-moving subjects versus still subjects, because some still subjects aren't still. Quite a lot of them aren't. You know, if you're taking a photograph of a granite headstone or a fence post or something like that, there's a good chance it's pretty still. So that gets you to the other end of the spectrum then, really, in terms of getting sharp images. There's this thing about using a tripod, and there's a rule of thumb that is quite well known in the photography industry, that people say to me, so what shutter speed should I have if I'm taking a subject that is like people or a landscape or whatever it might be? And the rule of thumb, it broadly is, on a full frame camera, if you're shooting with a 50mm lens, then you, in order to be able to handhold it and not have any camera shake, blur, which is effectively what that is not the subject moving. So let's assume I'm taking a photograph of a granite rock on Dartmoor. Fair to say it's not going to be moving, but I'm moving very slightly as I'm holding my lens. That's called camera shake. And camera shake will be pronounced or visible in your image if you shoot at a shutter speed below the length of the lens, in simple terms. So if you're shooting at 100mm on a full frame camera, 100th of a second, 200mm, 200th of a second, 500mm, I mean, you get these long lenses, 500th of a second or faster. If you're using a crop sensor camera, because this multiplication factor, 1.6, I typically just double it. So if it's a 50mm lens on a crop sensor camera, then shoot at 100th of a second. Let's see what's going on here. This one's blurry. Shouldn't be. And I'll tell you what. Let me just. We have got a setting here which I can undo. How's that? That should improve it. It shouldn't be though. It could be the internet speed. But thanks for letting me know, John. But anybody else? Keith, what are you seeing? Keith normally listening on the audio. So anyway, it's sharp on my image here. So let me just check one other setting. Streaming speed. I can check that. Yep, it's all set at the right speed. So might be your internet speed. Or, and we've had this before, the streaming setting on your, so if you're watching this on Facebook, YouTube, or wherever you're watching it, the speed at which, not the speed, the definition at which your thing can be running, that you stream your images at, is something you can set. So you might be on low definition, high definition, 1080p, HD, whatever it is. So have a quick look at that. That's probably got something to do with it. So what I was going to say, so yes, at the bottom end of the spectrum, you've got to think about things like that. So don't get confused with, okay, I've got that now. So a still subject, so I've got a dog stat still, I'm shooting a 100mm lens, so I've got to be 100th of a second. Well, you do need to be at that speed or more to stop camera shake, but don't forget, a little doggy, it's got fur. And if the fur is going to be moving and stuff like that, shimmering in the wind, and of course they're breathing, moving in and out and all that, it will be blurred. So that's the other end of the spectrum. So there's a few things to think about. And shutter speed is important, but it's not the only thing, which we'll come on to talk about now. So the next thing then, that often actually is the thing that causes the appearance of a lack of focus or not a sharp image, is, of course, I've just thought another one here, so I might make a note here because I must talk about that, is aperture. So depth of field, and I tend to shoot my images. Let me show you some of the things that I've done with a shallow depth field. So look at that. All the background's all nice and blurry. Same here, look. His legs and his front are blurry, but his face is sharp. It's lovely gannet. Nice and sharp, background nice and blurry. Nice and sharp, background nice and blurry. And that's a function of a thing called depth of field. And if you're an amateur or you're a beginner, or you're probably for an amateur, you might know, but if you're a beginner and you're not sure what I'm talking about, it is basically the technical description. The most commonly used one is the amount of image that's acceptably sharp. But focus starts and ends in an image. So if you look at, let's look at this bird here. It starts on his wings and ends just beyond them. If you look at this one, let's find another one that's got, let's find one. Here we go. This one starts, it covers most of the dog, but if you look at the scrub, the hay on the bottom, you can see that it's sharp underneath him. So just below his nose, you can see there, just below my logo, that the image is relatively sharp. And it stays sharp to about his back knees and then starts to get soft. And that's a thing called depth of field. And that's a very useful tool to use in images to create a nice sort of effect. So here's some macro stuff I've done. Very shallow depth of field here. The wings and the body and the sort of head of this hoverfly are in focus, but even the little petals on the flowers aren't. Oyster catchers, look. Background blown out, foreground blown out, but the birds themselves nice and sharp. That's what we call depth of field. Now, it can have an effect because, of course, if you look at these oyster catchers, the stones and the lichen on the front are not sharp, and neither is the background. So if I had focused slightly further back or slightly further forward, you'd have the oyster catchers looking like the stones looking. So depth of field is something not to underestimate when it comes to getting a sharp image. It can be as little as millimeters. So in the case of Mr. Hoverfly here, a couple of millimeters of depth of field, shooting at 2.8, really, really close. So, okay, that all makes sense, I hope. But how do we manage depth of field? So there's a couple of things. The most common one that people think about when it comes to depth of field is aperture. And that's true. So if you're shooting at 2.8, you'll have a depth of field that equals A. If you shoot at 3.5 or 3.6, it will be B, and so on. It gets bigger as you shoot at wider aperture. So wider aperture being, in fact, I've got a little chart here. Look at this. At top here, look. F1.4, bloke in focus. All the other end, F32, bloke in focus, mountains in focus. So that's the thing to think about in terms of depth of field. Now, how do you manage it? If, for example, you need the light. So if you're in a low light situation, welcome to the UK, folks, in terms of our weather, and you need to shoot at 2.8 to get the light you want, and you've got a shallow depth of field, but it's too shallow or not shallow enough to get your nice sort of focus looking right, what do you do? Now, the other thing that affects it is the zoom of your lens. So 100 mil zoomed out to 50 mil, that will change it, as well as the distance between you, your camera, and the subject. Let me show you what I mean. So look at these three images here. 70 mil, 135 mil, 200 mil. Look at the difference in depth of field. So the one on the left at 70 mil, you can see the camera, and there's probably a foot or so before it, or if you look at the grass, or it even looks like it's astroturf actually, the camera, and then the background starts to get soft, but not so soft that you can't make it out. And as we zoom in a little bit to 135, so we've doubled it a little bit, the depth of field at the front is a little bit shallower and the background's a bit shallower, and the same here at 200 mil. Now, that has, but the aperture here is exactly the same. I think it was 2.8 from memory. So if you want to get more of an aperture, more of a depth field, so you're shooting dogs quite close at 2.8 and there's not much light, so you can't play with your aperture much, then just step back. Because literally I find I shoot with a depth at 2.8, I'm looking at my door here, but probably 10, 15 feet. So I get about 2 inches of depth of field. So as long as I get the focus on the eyes, it's how I want it. If I need a bit more, taking a meter step back can add that much depth of field. It can make quite a difference. So just keep that in mind, and that allows you to then maximize or minimize. If you want to go the other way, get a bit closer, and you'll see the depth of field narrow. There's a little app. I haven't got a picture on here. There's quite a few. If you go onto the App Store or the Google Store, whatever it is for Androids, there's one called Depth of Field Calc. I think it's 50p that I use, which basically you put your camera in. The reason you have to put your camera in is different sensors have different depth of fields. So the equivalent depth field on my camera with this full frame camera would be less or more than, say, a crop sensor camera. So this little app, put that in, and you put it in once, and then all you do is you tell it the f-stop that you're shooting at, so you plug in 2.8, and then you put in the distance, and it shows you how much depth of field you got. Worth having a look, because you will be very, very, very surprised at sometimes how much depth of field you do not have. Let's look at this one here. So I would say that probably is it. It's a black and white, it's quite an old shot actually, but not much depth of field there at all. Whereas if you talk about landscape shots, of course, shooting at f32, f22, all those sort of big numbers, huge amount of depth of field. This is quite a famous shot actually. I took this as Badger and Woody years ago. I was stood in the river and got them jumping. I think I shot that at 5.6 because they were quite close to me, and also I needed to have a bit of latitude because I wasn't quite sure where they were going to be when I took the picture. So that's one thing to be thinking about. The other thing you've got to think about when it gets to terms of getting these really tack sharp images is try not to take an image like that, but with it this big in the frame. This is the frame. You've got, I don't know, say a camera these days, 30 megapixel sensor, not uncommon. Mine's 24, my full frame camera. But whatever it is, let's say 30, crossed out around here. And that's the thing that creates the photodiodes that create the image. Well, not diodes actually, but that create the image in your sensor. Now, if you use just the middle bit here, which is probably 10% of it, that's 3 megapixels, and then zoom and then crop in and stretch it out, all those dots suddenly do that. Really important. So if you are looking for tack sharp images and images that have got lots of definition that really stand out and jump off the page, all the things I've talked about up to this point are valid. So make sure you've got the depth field is what you want. Make sure you've got the right shutter speed, but also make sure you use as much of the sensor as you can, so you do not have to do too much cropping, because the dots are there and you're going to stretch them out. That has quite an impact. The other thing that comes up is image stabilization, which is IS, they call it on Canon, VR on Nikons and so on. They've all got, most brands have got their own version of it. But effectively, that, and this is where it can get confusing. I've got a lot of people I've worked with who've transformed their photography from a point of view of action shots, wildlife, dogs, or whatever it is, because they were making a fundamental mistake. This, you won't be able to see it, but you might be able to actually, if I put that up there. So it says stabilizer, stabilizer on, off. This is a coffee mug, by the way. This is not a lens. Image stabilization on the majority of kit is about you hand holding your camera in low light, low shutter speed situations. Not really meant for action shots, because if you think about what it's doing, it's compensating for this sort of movement by moving. There's lots of little motors. When you switch it on, you can usually hear little buzzing noise, little gyroscopes around the sensor around the optical kit in your lens, sort of keeping the bits of glass from moving. So when you do that, I exaggerate, it will do that to compensate and sort of try and make adjustments. Very minor, very effective. It can give you 3 or 4 stops more of a shutter speed, lower. So say you're supposed to shoot at 100th of a second, say this is 100 mil, but with VR switched on or IS switched on in a low light situation, I might be able to get away with 25th of a second. 4 times slower, because this is compensating for this sort of movement. Think about how it works though. If you then try and use that for action, you've got an eagle running across, or an otter running across the seas, kelp, whatever it might be, dogs running at you, and you start doing this, all those little motors are going to go nuts, and they just won't be able to cope with it. So I have found, and I've been doing it 6 years, so doggy stuff, certainly, that since I've been doing it for 50 odd or 30 odd years in terms of photography, but the business went live 6 years ago. You will get much more of a keeper rate by having it switched off for action photography. Low light, definitely. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is noise. Let's have a look. I've got a picture of noise, because I'm sure you all know what it is. But let me find a picture of it. Where's it gone? I keep organizing my pictures on here, and I move them all around, and I do it every day, and every day I say the same thing. There we go. So left image, low ISO, nice and clean. Right image, high ISO. Well, not that high, 3200, noise image. Noise is the graininess in your image. And you need to try and, if your mission is a tack sharp, standout, really well-focused image, you want to avoid noise. And there are a number of ways of doing that. The most obvious one is keeping your ISO as low as possible. But try and avoid shadows, dark, a black dog in shadow somewhere is going to be difficult. So for example, this one was a real challenge. Getting a pug to jump at this speed is almost impossible, but we managed it. But it was quite an overcast day. So I managed to deal with this by making sure we had quite a lot of reflective light. So there was quite a nice amount of light. It wasn't a bright day, but there was a nice amount of light bouncing up from the grass underneath. So that helped. But yeah, if you've got a dark subject and you've still got a low ISO, you're going to get noise, because your camera is struggling a bit. It's like, I can't see what's going on. Like these dark bits in the background. It's like, oh, what's that noise? The same as if it's struggling to focus. If it's a lot of hunting a little bit, that creates noise. So noise is something you want to try and avoid. And the main thing is, shooting decent light with decent depth of field and making sure your camera is focusing. If your camera is struggling to focus, so on, say, a black dog, let's have a look, something like this. When you've got a single contrasting color, not contrasting, a single color like a magnolia on a wall, or a black dog, or even a lab that's all one color, no contrasty bits. Even the most modern cameras will struggle to focus on it, because they need some kind of contrast to grab focus. So if that's the case, use pre-focus. So focus, I use back button focus, which is a really useful tool. In fact, we'll talk about because what that does effectively is, instead of having the camera trying to focus all the time when I'm holding it and pressing the button, I've got a button on the back that will do the same thing. I've got to press it if I want it to focus, but I can let go. So that then allows me to do something like, what have we done? This one here. I was able to focus on the heather here, that's in front here, let go, of fairness, there's decent light here, and take the picture as the dog appeared over the heather at a rate of knots, as you can probably tell by the face on this dog. But that means the camera's not going to try and focus. If you've got a, this one, same thing here, it's quite a dark dog, very difficult for the camera to grab focus on that because it's all pretty much the same color over the dog's face. So having focus on the ground, I put a little log across, I think it was, or a leaf, so I could work out where it was going to be, pre-focus, and then take the picture. So you're taking, by doing that, one element of the equation out of it. So your camera has focused on a particular point. So what you have to do then, of course, is you are making sure all you got to do is take the picture at the right time, making sure you've got the aperture set right and the shutter speed is the correct shutter speed. And the ISO is wherever you can get away with. So that's something else to think about. Those are the main things I want to talk about. Here we go, 26 minutes. I'll try and keep these to half an hour, although the mastermind will be a bit longer, I'm sure. And if people come on and ask lots of questions, they're often longer as well. So what can I say? That's a few of my tips, not the be all and end all, and we will cover in the academy. Well, obviously the doors are open for the academy for full membership on Thursday morning, first thing. It might be Wednesday late night, so it's done. But also the new full frame club. So if you are thinking about setting up a business, you've already got a business, or you want to go part-time in the business and earn some income from your passion for photography, which, trust me, I did 6 years ago, and I wish I did it 10 years, 20 years ago, then that's what that's all about. Full membership will be part of that as well. So you'll get bits of both, if that makes sense. And in that, we'll talk about not just business, but getting sharp images. This subject I've talked about today is not something that you can cover off in detail in a 20-minute webinar, but just give you a few tips and pointers in terms of direction here, I think is the important bit. So, as I say, I've given you the list of all the other webinars. There's quite a lot going on. No more today, he says, but the next ones are, just so you know, I'll remind you, got me open it up. Where's it gone? We'll go. Keep shutting my Facebook page. So on there, there's my list. Right. So the rest of the day is nothing today. So tomorrow, midday, business challenges. If you're thinking about business, or you've got a business and you get challenges, come along. Got lots to talk about there. And in the afternoon, personal style. We'll talk about that. And then obviously during the rest of the week, there's all that. All on the Facebook pages. If you want to get yourself a reminder, click on it just so you don't miss it. The playbacks are there as well. So once these are done, they stay on there. I'm not going to make them disappear. I'm not cheeky like that. So if you are thinking about joining the academy, you just, beginner, amateur, whatever it is, or just love photography, you'll be able to do that again. We haven't opened for ages now on Thursday morning. But if you want to join the academy from a point of view of the Full Frame Club, which is all about getting your business going or maximizing your business with all sorts of stuff going on in it, all the details of which are available on the website at the moment, beyondthelensacademy.com, and there's a little link to register interest. And that just gives me the ability to, there's a form you fill out, tells me a little bit about your equipment, your background, what you're thinking of, so that we can make sure that those people we get in, we let in, if that makes sense, are people that fit what we're trying to achieve. So we're not wasting their time or their money, or our time really, because we are busy people. One final thing. A few people have asked me, how come you only open the doors so many times a year, which is what we do, a few times a year. The reason for that is we are very busy working with and helping and supporting our clients, our members, whether that's the photographers who join the full membership, or whether it's people who've joined in the past, what was called Pro Aspiring Pro, and have set up businesses. And you'll see some of the reviews on the registration form, or even on the Facebook page, if you're on the Beyond the Lens Academy Facebook page. If you are, go and have a look at the reviews. People have come along and set up businesses. So we spend a lot of time doing that, and I do. I'm very involved with it. This is not a club where you join and watch a load of videos. It's a full-on. There is lots of content to watch. Trust me, loads of it. But it's a full-on live, organic sort of live learning process platform. So I hope that's been helpful. Say there's going to be plenty more this week. Have a great week. I know it's only Monday, but it is almost Christmas. So thanks for your time, and I'll hopefully see you again soon. See you later. Bye. Thank you.